I am trying to sit outside and enjoy this weather, even as I pray for it to get just a little bit cooler. But what a great example of something that fits right into the practice of Musar, the practice of guiding our personal characteristics to become the better version of ourselves, as Judaism calls us to do. The weather is something that over which we have, it's the ultimate example of something over which we do not have control. Despite the amazing feats of science, we can measure it, we can predict it, but at the end of the day, we really can't fully control it. We certainly can't turn down the temperature, at least outside. And yet, it is something I personally struggle with. I have found that I get angry at the weather. Maybe because I live in Houston, but I find myself getting viscerally impacted by when it's October and it's still in the 80s, and I feel like I want to rail against heaven. I'm just so annoyed and frustrated. And for me, it's this wonderful example, this ultimate example of something over which I have zero control. And yet, I have this inkling, I have this desire to express my frustration as if something I could say or do would have an impact. Instead, what Musar would teach us, as we studied last year, the midah, the characteristic of humility, it leads right into this week's characteristic, the midah, and that is of patience. Patience, according to the tradition, or impatience rather, is directly connected to an inability to exercise humility. Our impatience is that act, that which we act upon when we forget that we are not in control, or when we forget that a reaction, especially a quick reaction, an engaged and frustrated and maybe even angry reaction, won't have the desired outcome, but instead is much more akin to just throwing fuel on the fire. And we know how this plays out in our interpersonal relationships. So humility leads us into this attribute of patience. Patience in Hebrew is savlanut. And if you just change one little bit of the vowel of savlanut, which means patience, you get the word sovlanut, which means tolerance. And you can see how these ideas play into themselves. That humility leads to patience, and patience can lead to greater tolerance, precisely because we do not have the control over our world like our impulses would hope. And ultimately, all of this comes down to taking time, to trying to create greater space between the match and the fuse. And so our prayers this week, we are guided towards trying to tamp down our tendency to react, to slow down our immediate reaction of deciding what someone said really meant, or responding with anger or frustration or rage or fear or even sadness in the face of something or someone. And so often projecting onto them an intention that we feel a certain way. So we try to widen that space between what we receive and how we react. And this week we're going to dig in to this idea. How do we cultivate patience for the sake of ourselves, for the sake of those we live with, for the sake of our own dreams, visions, what we want for ourselves in the world? So I invite you to just sit for a moment and let these ideas sit with you just for a minute or so. As we ponder, what might my life be like if I practiced patience in a more active way? It's a luxury to be able to spend a few minutes on these existential ideas when we are healthy, when our bodies are working well enough. We are able to spend time like this. And we know that there are people who are working hard to heal their own bodies, for whom perhaps these thoughts would be not feasible at the moment. So we call to mind those who are in need of healing, in need of wholeness, those who are suffering from illness, those with COVID, and those who are serving those in need of healing. I invite you to write in those names into our chat, and I strongly encourage you to read those names so as to make sure that their names, if you know their faces, come to mind, and you send them prayers of healing and wholeness. El Narifanala Refuah Shleima El Narifanala. Please heal their souls. Mishebeirach Avraham v'Sarah Yitzchak v'Rivka Yaakov Rachel v'Leah El Narefanala Refuah Shleima El Narefanala. Please heal these souls. Please heal these souls. Please heal these souls. May you all go from strength to strength, from peace to wholeness. And may all those you know who are in need of healing find that healing and wholeness and the ability to get up and move forward into life and become a blessing. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. It's been a day.
Thank you for your words, Rabbi.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Hi, Joan.
Bye, Joan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye.